I'm Colleen. I'm standing under a streetlight, the city around me alive with the hum of traffic and the distant laughter of strangers. The air smells of wet stone and possibility, and for the first time in what feels like forever, I can breathe. The memory of the cabin, the fear, and the betrayal have finally faded into the past, replaced by a newfound sense of peace and hope. It all started with a man named Ethan. I met him at an art exhibition, and he was instantly charming. He had a way of making me feel like the only person in the room, and I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. We started dating, and everything seemed perfect. He took me to new places, introduced me to his friends, and made me feel like I was part of something bigger than myself. But as time went on, I started to notice some things that didn't add up. He was always vague about his job, and he seemed to be more interested in my aunt's house than in me. My aunt, Amelia, was a retired opera singer who lived in a beautiful old house on the outskirts of the city. She had a collection of rare antiques and artifacts, including a platinum plate that she had received as an award for her performance in a famous opera. One night, Ethan suggested that we take a weekend trip to a cabin in the woods. I was hesitant at first, but he convinced me that it would be a great way to relax and get away from the city. We drove up to the cabin, and everything seemed fine at first. But as the night went on, I started to feel strange. I had a headache, and I was dizzy and disoriented. I tried to get up and leave, but I couldn't. I was too weak. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a dark, damp room. I was cold and alone, and I had no idea where I was. I tried to call for help, but my voice was hoarse and weak. I looked around the room and saw that it was a small cabin with a single window and a rusty stove. There was a table and a chair, but nothing else. I realized that I had been drugged and kidnapped. I tried to find a way out of the cabin, but the door was locked and the window was boarded up. I was trapped. I sat on the floor and cried, feeling helpless and afraid. I thought about my aunt, and I wondered if she was okay. I knew that Ethan had something to do with this, but I didn't know why. As the hours passed, I started to hear voices outside the cabin. I listened closely, and I realized that there were two men talking. They were talking about my aunt's house and the platinum plate. They said that Ethan had sent them to get it, and that they were going to break into the house and steal it. I was horrified. I knew that I had to do something to stop them. I looked around the room and saw a stove poker. I picked it up and held it tightly in my hand. I knew that it wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I waited for the men to leave, and then I tried to break out of the cabin. I used the poker to pry open the window, and I managed to get out. I ran into the woods, trying to find a way back to the city. It was dark and cold, and I was lost. I didn't know which way to go, and I was afraid that the men would find me. I kept running, hoping that I would find help. After what felt like hours, I came across a shed. I went inside and found a pair of boots and a jacket. I put them on and felt a little warmer. I continued to run, and eventually I found a road. I followed the road, and I saw a truck coming towards me. I waved my arms and shouted for help, and the truck stopped. The driver was a man named Jack. He was a ranger who was patrolling the area. He saw that I was in trouble, and he offered to help me. I told Jack what had happened, and he took me to his cabin. He called the police, and they came to the cabin to take my statement. They also went to my aunt's house to check on her. They found her unconscious, but she was alive. The men had broken into the house and stolen the platinum plate, but they had also left her alive. The police were able to track down Ethan and the two men who had kidnapped me. They were arrested, and they were charged with kidnapping, burglary, and attempted murder. Ethan was also charged with drug possession and distribution. He was sentenced to several years in prison, and the two men were also sentenced to prison. My aunt recovered from her injuries, and she was grateful to be alive. She and I moved back into her house, and we started to rebuild our lives. I also started to see a therapist to help me deal with the trauma of what had happened. It was a long and difficult process, but I was determined to move on. Over time, I met a new man named Tom. He was kind, gentle, and understanding. He helped me to heal, and he made me feel loved and safe. We got married, and we had a beautiful daughter. Life was good, and I was happy. But even though I had moved on, I could never forget what had happened. The memory of the cabin, the fear, and the betrayal would always be with me. But I also knew that I had learned a valuable lesson. I had learned to trust my instincts, and I had learned to be more careful about who I let into my life. As I stand here under the streetlight, I look up at the sky and think about how far I've come. I think about the pain and the suffering that I've endured, and I think about the strength and the resilience that I've found within myself. I know that life is full of challenges and obstacles, but I also know that I have the courage and the determination to overcome them. I take a deep breath and let it out slowly. I feel a sense of peace and contentment wash over me. I know that I'm not alone, and I know that I have the support of my family and my friends. I look down at my daughter, who is sleeping in my arms, and I smile. I know that I have everything that I need. The piano inside the concert hall behind me begins to play, soft, deliberate notes echoing into the golden night. I listen to the music, and I feel a sense of hope and optimism. I know that the future is uncertain, but I also know that I'm ready to face whatever comes my way. I take a step forward, and I begin to walk. The city around me is alive with possibility, and I'm ready to embrace it.